The champagne flutes clinked around me like tiny bells of judgment, and I stood there in my mother's living room, surrounded by Atlanta's black elite. Community leaders, church mothers in their finest hats, holding a glass I couldn't drink from. My hand trembled, not from the weight of crystal, but from the weight of 30 years of lies that had just shattered at my feet. Keisha, baby, there's something you need to know. Those words, my mother's words, spoken 2 hours ago in the funeral home parking lot, right after we'd buried the man I'd called Daddy my entire life, Robert Langford. The man who'd shown up to every school play, who'd slipped 20s into my palm with a wink, who'd somehow always known when I needed help with tuition, with rent, with life. Except he wasn't my father. My mother's voice still echoed in my skull. Your biological father. He was my boss, a white man, married, powerful. He died knowing about you, Keisha. He's been watching over you your whole life. I'd laughed, actually laughed. Because what else do you do when your identity splits down the middle like a tree struck by lightning? Now, standing in this room full of people celebrating my mother's retirement, her 40 years of climbing from receptionist to director of operations, I couldn't stop staring at her. Marion Monroe, the woman who'd taught me about Harriet Tubman and Maya Angelou, who'd braided my hair while reciting Langston Hughes, who'd held my face in her hands when I was 16 and said, "Baby, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much, but you're strong enough." She'd been talking about being black in America. She hadn't mentioned I was only half of what she'd taught me to be. The room blurred. Faces I'd known since childhood suddenly felt like strangers. Mrs. Patterson from church, who'd always said I had interesting features. Uncle Jerome, who'd joke about my good hair. Had they known? Had everyone known except me? My mother caught my eye from across the room. She was radiant in royal blue, her short natural hair gleaming under the soft lights, her smile wide as she accepted congratulations. But I saw it now, the tightness around her eyes, the way her hands gripped her champagne glass like a lifeline, the performance of a woman who'd been performing for decades. She raised her glass toward me. A toast, an offering, an apology maybe. I didn't raise mine back, because somewhere in this city, in some lawyer's office with my name on documents I'd never seen, there was a white man's fortune waiting for a black daughter he'd never claimed. A man who'd loved my mother enough to help from the shadows, but not enough to step into the light. A man who'd paid for my education through anonymous scholarships, who'd ensured I had opportunities while denying me the one thing that mattered most, the truth. And as I stood there, watching my mother bask in applause she'd earned through silence, I made a decision that would crack our family wide open. I was done being the secret they kept. I was going to claim what was mine. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching this from? What city are you in right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know where my story is reaching you, because what happens next? It could happen anywhere, to anyone. Let me know. Let me take you back to before everything fell apart, back to when I still knew who I was. 3 months earlier, I was sitting in my cubicle at Henderson & Associates, Atlanta's second largest corporate law firm, doing what I did best, making lawyers look good. As a paralegal, I was the invisible architect behind their victories. I drafted motions, organized evidence, researched precedents until my eyes burned. I was 29 years old, ambitious, and convinced I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Keisha, you're a lifesaver," Mark Henderson himself had said just that morning, dropping a Starbucks cup on my desk. "That brief you put together on the Dawson case? Perfection. You've got a legal mind, girl." "Girl," I'd smiled, thanked him, ignored the casual diminishment I'd learned to swallow like bitter medicine. My cubicle was decorated with intention, a framed photo of Thurgood Marshall, a postcard from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a small succulent I'd named Harriet, after Tubman, obviously. These weren't just decorations. They were reminders, anchors, evidence that I belonged in spaces that hadn't always welcomed people who looked like me. I'd leave the office around 6 most evenings, drive through Atlanta traffic while listening to podcasts about criminal justice reform, or Nina Simone, depending on my mood. I'd stop by Busy Bee Cafe for fried chicken and collard greens, exchanging pleasantries with Miss Gloria behind the counter who'd known me since I was in pigtails. Then I'd head to my mother's house in the old Fourth Ward. That's where my center was. Always had been. My mother, Marion Monroe, lived in a modest brick house she'd bought 20 years ago, back when the neighborhood was still rough by white standards, which meant it was affordable for a single black mother working her way up in corporate America. Now the neighborhood was revitalized, which meant white people had discovered our coffee shops and murals. But Mama stayed. "I'm not running from my own community," she'd say whenever realtors left cards in her mailbox. That particular evening, I found her in the kitchen, gospel music playing softly from her Bluetooth speaker, Shirley Caesar, her favorite. She was chopping onions for her famous spaghetti sauce, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her short natural hair catching the warm kitchen light. "There's my baby girl," she said without looking up. Mothers have that sixth sense. "Hey, Mama." I dropped my bag on the counter and stole a piece of garlic bread cooling on the stove. "Wash your hands first, Keisha Monroe. I know you've been touching courthouse documents all day." I laughed, obeying. At 29, I still followed my mother's house rules without question. Some habits are bone deep. We fell into our rhythm. Her cooking, me setting the table, both of us talking about our days. She told me about a difficult meeting with the new CFO, some young white guy who thought he could mansplain her own department to her. I told her about Mark Henderson's girl comment. "That's why you're getting your law degree, baby," Mama said, pointing her wooden spoon at me for emphasis. "So you can be the name on the door, not the girl in the cubicle." I was taking night classes at Georgia State. Slow going, but steady. In 3 years, I'd have my JD, in 4, I'd pass the bar. The plan was solid. The future was clear. "Daddy called today," I mentioned casually, reaching for plates. My mother's hand paused, just for a second, before continuing to stir. "Robert, what did he want?" "Just checking in," asked about my classes. "Said he was proud of me." Robert Langford, the man I'd called Daddy since I was old enough to speak, even though my mother never married him. Their relationship had always been complicated in ways I'd never fully understood. He'd been present but distant, loving but formal. He'd show up for birthdays and graduations, always with generous gifts and warm hugs. But he never stayed the night, never moved in, never made it official. When I was younger, maybe 8 or 9, I'd asked Mama why Daddy didn't live with us. "Some families look different, baby," she'd said, braiding my hair on the front porch. "Doesn't mean the love is any less real. I'd accepted that. Children accept what they're given. Robert was a presence in my life the way weather is. Constant, expected, rarely questioned. He was a tall white man with graying temples and kind blue eyes, who dressed like money and spoke with the careful diction of someone who'd grown up with etiquette lessons. He owned a logistics company, something involving shipping and distribution that I'd never fully understood but knew was successful. What I did understand was that he cared. He'd attended my high school graduation in the sweltering heat of a May afternoon, sitting in the stands with Mama, applauding louder than anyone when I crossed the stage. He'd helped with my undergraduate tuition at Spelman, though Mama always said it was through his company's scholarship program. He'd given me advice about internships, introduced me to people in his network, opened doors I didn't even know existed. "He's been good to us," Mama would say, whenever I questioned the strangeness of our arrangement. And he had been. So I stopped questioning. That evening, as Mama and I sat down to dinner, she seemed distracted. She kept glancing at her phone, her fork moving food around her plate more than actually eating it. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine, baby. Just tired. Work's been heavy lately. I didn't push." Marion Monroe had earned her tiredness. She'd raised me alone while climbing corporate ladders designed to keep her on the ground floor. She'd worked double shifts when I needed braces, skipped vacations so I could go to summer camp, sacrificed her youth so I could have opportunities. Looking at her across that table, this strong, beautiful black woman who'd given me everything, I felt a rush of gratitude so powerful it tightened my throat. "I love you, Mama," I said suddenly. She looked up, surprised, then smiled that smile that had been my North Star my entire life. "I love you too, baby girl, more than you'll ever know." The way she said it, there was something underneath, something heavy, but I was too comfortable in my ignorance to hear it. After dinner, I drove home to my apartment in Midtown, a small one-bedroom I could barely afford but loved because it had exposed brick and big windows. I poured a glass of wine, put on Solange, and reviewed my class notes for the next day. This was my life, structured, purposeful, built on the foundation my mother had laid and the support Robert had provided. I had my community. I had my ambition. I had my identity. I was Keisha Monroe, a young black woman making her way in a world that tried to limit her, but refusing to be limited. I knew where I came from. I knew where I was going. What I didn't know was that in 3 months, everything I thought I knew would detonate like a bomb, and I'd be left standing in the wreckage, trying to piece together who I actually was from fragments of lies. But that night I went to sleep believing I understood my story. God, I was so wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was in the middle of drafting a motion to dismiss. My phone vibrated across my desk and I almost ignored it. I was on a deadline, and Mark Henderson didn't accept excuses. But something made me look at the screen. Mama, calling at 9:47 a.m. on a workday. She never called during work hours. We had an unspoken rule. Emergencies only. My stomach dropped before I even answered. Mama? The sound that came through the phone wasn't words. It was something primal, a keening, broken noise that made every muscle in my body clench. Mama, what's wrong? What happened? He's gone. Her voice cracked like glass. Robert's gone, baby. He's gone. The office sounds around me. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the hum of the copy machine, all faded into static. I stood up without deciding to, my chair rolling backward and hitting the cubicle wall. What do you mean gone? Heart attack. This morning, at his office. They tried, the paramedics tried, but he was already... She couldn't finish. She dissolved into sobs that made my own chest hurt. I don't remember grabbing my purse. I don't remember telling Mark I was leaving. I just remember running through the parking garage, my heels echoing against concrete, my breathing sharp and panicked. Robert Langford, dead, at 55 years. Old, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike in Piedmont. Park, who'd taken me to the aquarium every year, for my birthday because he knew I loved the beluga whales. Who'd told me, just 2 weeks ago, that I was going to be a brilliant lawyer. Gone. I drove to Mama's house on autopilot, breaking every speed limit, tears streaming down my face. When I burst through her front door, I found her on the couch, still in her work clothes, clutching a throw pillow like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. I'd never seen my mother like this. Marion Monroe didn't break. She bent, she adapted, she endured, but she didn't shatter. Yet here she was, shattered. I sat beside her and pulled her into my arms, and we cried together until we had nothing left. The next 3 days passed in a fog of funeral arrangements, phone calls and casseroles from church ladies. Robert's assistant called with details. The service would be at First Presbyterian, the big historic church downtown with the white columns and vaulted ceilings. There would be a reception after at the Capital City Club. Everything about it felt wrong. Too formal, too white, too distant from the man I'd known. Why not Ebenezer Baptist? I asked Mama the night before the funeral. We were sitting at her kitchen table reviewing the program his assistant had sent over. He supported that church. He knew Reverend Davis. Why some Presbyterian church where nobody knew him? Mama's hands trembled as she held her coffee cup. That's where his family wants it, baby. His family? I looked at her, confused. We're his family. You and me. She didn't respond. Just stared into her coffee like it held answers she couldn't speak out loud. The funeral was surreal. I wore a black dress I'd bought that morning because I'd never needed funeral clothes before. I was 29, and death hadn't touched my life until now. Mama wore black too, with a hat and gloves, looking like she'd stepped out of a different era. We arrived early and sat in the third row. Not the first row. That detail nagged at me, but I didn't question it. The church filled quickly with people I didn't recognize. White people in expensive suits and designer dresses, business associates, I assumed. People from Robert's world, a world I'd only glimpsed in fragments. Then they walked in. A woman in her early 50s, blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a black Chanel suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Behind her, 2 young men in their 20s, both with Robert's blue eyes and strong jaw. They walked straight to the first row and sat down. My breath caught. "Mama, his wife," she whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear. "And his sons." The words hit me like a physical blow. Wife. Sons. I turned to stare at my mother, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat rigid, staring straight ahead, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. Robert Langford had been married. He had a family, a whole other life, and we'd been, what, the secret? The side piece? The inconvenient truth tucked away in the old Fourth Ward while his real family lived in. Where, Buckhead? Brookhaven? Some mansion I'd never seen? My mind raced backward through every memory, reframing them. Every birthday he'd come to but left early. Every graduation where he'd stood apart from Mama, not touching her, not claiming her. Every Christmas gift delivered by courier instead of in person. The service began, and I heard none of it. I watched Robert's wife, Catherine, I learned from the program, dab her eyes with a handkerchief. I watched his son sit stoic and strong, the way men are taught to grieve. I watched a parade of white people stand at the pulpit and talk about Robert's business acumen, his philanthropy, his dedication to community service. One speaker mentioned his work with the Boys and Girls Club in Southwest Atlanta. Another talked about his scholarship fund for underprivileged youth. Underprivileged. That's what they called us. The people he'd helped from a distance while keeping his real life pristine and white and acceptable. I felt like I was watching a stranger's funeral. When it ended, people filed past the casket. I stayed seated until Mama gently touched my arm. "We should pay our respects, baby." "Respects?" I hissed, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Mama, what the hell is going on?" "Not here," she whispered urgently. "Please, Keisha." "Not here," so I stood. I walked to that casket on legs that didn't feel like mine. I looked down at Robert Langford's face, peaceful, composed, unreachable, and felt nothing but confusion and anger. Who was this man? At the reception, Mama and I stood near the back, holding plates of food we couldn't eat. We didn't belong here, among these people with their country club memberships and vacation homes. I watched Catherine Langford accept condolences with grace, her sons flanking her like guards. Then something happened that made my blood freeze. One of the sons, the older one, maybe 27, glanced across the room and saw us. His eyes locked on my mother and his face changed. Recognition. Then something darker. He leaned down and whispered something to his mother. Catherine Langford turned and looked directly at us. The hatred in her eyes was so pure, so concentrated, that I actually took a step backward. She knew. She'd always known. "We need to leave," Mama said suddenly, setting down her untouched plate. "Mama, what?" "Now, Keisha, please." We left, walked out of that country club into the Atlanta humidity, and I followed my mother to her car in silence because I didn't trust myself to speak without screaming. We sat in her car in the parking lot. "The engine off, the heat building. Explain," I said finally. "Right now, explain what the hell I just witnessed." Mama gripped the steering wheel like she was trying to strangle it. Her chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. She was having a panic attack, I realized. My unshakable mother was falling apart. "Mama, he wasn't your father," she blurted out. The words exploded into the space between us like shrapnel. "Robert wasn't your biological father, Keisha. He was a good man who helped us, who cared about us. But he wasn't your father." The car tilted. Or maybe I tilted. Everything went sideways. "What are you talking about?" She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face, destroying her carefully applied makeup. "When I was 20 years old, I got a job as a receptionist at Langford Logistics. Robert was my boss. He was married. He was white. And I was young and stupid, and I thought..." She choked on the words. It lasted 6 months. When I got pregnant, he begged me not to tell anyone, said it would destroy his marriage, his business, everything. He offered to help financially, to make sure you had everything you needed, but only if I kept quiet. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Your biological father..." She couldn't look at me anymore. She stared out the windshield at nothing. Your biological father was my boss at the company I work for. Was. He died 3 years ago. Lung cancer. You never met him. I don't understand. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Someone younger. Someone breaking. If Robert wasn't my father, then why was he in my life? Why did he? Because he felt guilty, Mama said, her voice hollow. Because he knew what it cost me to keep his secret. Because he watched you grow up knowing you were innocent in all of this. He loved you, Keisha. In his own way, he loved you. But he couldn't claim you. And I couldn't tell you because... She finally looked at me. Because I was afraid of losing you. Of you hating me. Of you seeing me as the young black girl who slept with her white married boss and got pregnant. The truth sat between us like a living thing, ugly and undeniable. I opened the car door and vomited into the parking lot. When I was done, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and looked at my mother, the stranger who'd raised me. Take me home, I said. Keisha, take me home. Now. We drove in silence. When she pulled up to my apartment, I got out without saying goodbye. I walked into my building, into my apartment with its exposed brick and big windows, and I stood in the middle of my living room feeling like every foundation beneath me had just dissolved, was 29 years old, didn't know who my father was. I didn't know who I was, and the woman I'd trusted. Most in the world had built my entire life on a lie. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after that. I called in sick, which wasn't technically a lie. I was sick. Sick with the kind of nausea that comes from having your entire identity ripped away and replaced with question marks. I spent those days in my apartment, curtains drawn, phone on silent, moving between my bed and my couch like a ghost haunting her own life. I kept replaying memories, searching for clues I'd missed. Every interaction with Robert now felt like a performance I'd been too naive to recognize. Every time Mama had changed the subject when I asked about my father. Every vague answer, every deflection. How many times had I asked? 10? 20? 100? Mama, why doesn't Daddy live with us? Some families are different, baby. Mama, why don't I look like Daddy? You have his eyes, sweetheart, see? That same kindness. Lies, all lies, and I'd swallowed them like gospel. On the third day, Mama started calling. I watched my phone light up with her name over and over, each call a fresh wound. I couldn't answer. Didn't know what I'd say if I did. The rage inside me was too big, too hot, too dangerous. By the fourth day, she showed up at my door. I heard her knocking, soft at first, then more insistent. Keisha, baby, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. I sat on my couch, frozen, staring at the door like it might explode. I'm not leaving, she called through the wood. I'll sit out here all day if I have to. Your neighbors are already staring. That got me up. The last thing I needed was Mrs. Chen from 3B adding this to her gossip repertoire. I yanked open the door. Mama stood there looking like she'd aged 10 years in 4 days. Her eyes were puffy and red. Her clothes rumpled. A shocking sight for a woman who never left the house without being perfectly put together. She held 2 coffees from Octane and a bag of breakfast sandwiches. Like food could fix this. Can I come in? I stepped aside without speaking. She walked into my apartment and immediately started tidying, picking up the takeout containers I'd left scattered, folding the throw blanket on the couch. Nervous habits. She couldn't stand still when she was anxious. You don't have to clean my apartment. Marion. The use of her first name made her flinch. Good. I wanted her to hurt the way I was hurting. Keisha, who is he? I cut her off. My biological father. You said he died 3 years ago. Who was he? She sank onto my couch, the coffee cup still in her hands, forgotten. His name was David Mitchell. He was VP of Operations at Langford Logistics. He was white? She nodded. Married? Another nod. I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't match anything funny. So you had a type. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. David was... It was complicated. Complicated. I paced across my small living room, my hands clenched into fists. That's your explanation? It was complicated? You know what's complicated, Mama? Growing up thinking you know who you are, only to find out at 29 that your entire identity was a lie. You're still you, baby? Don't call me that. The words exploded out of me. Don't you dare call me baby like we're still the same. Like nothing's changed. Everything's changed. She set down the coffee cups with shaking hands. You're right. You're absolutely right to be angry. Angry? I stopped pacing and stared at her. I'm not angry, Mama. I'm devastated. I'm destroyed. Do you understand what you've done? You didn't just lie about who my father was. You lied about who I am. I was trying to protect you. From what? The truth? My own identity? I felt tears burning my eyes and hated myself for it. I didn't want to cry. Crying meant I was still that little girl who needed her mama to make things better. Did you ever plan to tell me? She looked down at her hands. That was answer enough. Oh my God. I sank into the chair across from her. You were going to take this to your grave. You were going to let me live my entire life not knowing. I thought it was for the best, she whispered. David was gone. Robert was the closest thing to a father you'd ever known. What good would it do to tell you? To make you feel divided? Divided. The word tasted like ash. Is that what you think I am now? Divided? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I leaned forward, desperate for something that made sense. Explain it to me, Mama, because I'm trying so hard to understand how you could look at me every single day of my life and keep this locked away. She took a shuddering breath. I was 20 years old. I'd just gotten my first real job at a real company. I was so proud, Keisha. My mama cleaned houses her whole life. My daddy worked in a factory until it destroyed his back. And there I was, in an office, wearing professional clothes, making something of myself. I stayed silent, letting her talk. David noticed me, not in a creepy way. At least I didn't think so then. He was kind. He asked about my life, my dreams. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before. She wiped at her eyes. I knew he was married. I knew it was wrong. But he told me his marriage was over in everything but paperwork. He told me he'd never felt this way before. And I was young enough and stupid enough to believe him. Did Robert know? She nodded. David told him. They were close. Robert was CEO. David was his right hand. When I got pregnant, David panicked. He begged me to not have you. Said it would ruin everything. His marriage, his career, his reputation. My stomach turned. He wanted you to have an abortion. Yes. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. She looked at me with fierce determination. You were mine, Keisha, mine, and nobody was going to take that away from me. So what happened? Robert intervened. He told David to man up, to take care of his responsibilities even if he couldn't claim them publicly. He set up a trust fund for you, anonymous, untraceable. He made sure I kept my job, got promotions I deserved. He became a guardian, I guess, watching over us from a distance. And David, he paid child support through Robert's company, anonymously, every month until he died. He never once asked to meet you, never wanted to see you. He was terrified his wife would find out. Her voice cracked. 3 years ago when he got sick, Robert told me. Asked if I wanted to tell you, to give you a chance to meet him before he passed. But I said no, I couldn't. I'd built this life, this story, and I was too afraid to tear it down. I sat back, processing. So Robert wasn't my father, but he acted like one because, what, guilt? Pity? Love, Mama said firmly. He loved you, Keisha. Maybe it started as guilt, but it became real. He watched you grow up. He was proud of you. When you got into Spelman, he cried. Real tears. I saw them, but he never told me the truth either. No. She looked down. We both agreed it was better that way. Better for who? I stood up, unable to sit still anymore. Not for me. Never for me. You two decided what was better for me without ever asking what I wanted, without giving me a choice. You were a child. And when I turned 18, 21, 25, I threw up my hands. When exactly would I have been old enough for the truth, Mama? She had no answer. I walked to my window and stared out at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there, in some cemetery with a pristine headstone, was a man named David Mitchell. My biological father, a man who'd wanted me erased before I was even born, a man who'd paid money to assuage his guilt, but never had the courage to face what he'd created. And Robert Langford, the man I'd mourned, cried for, loved, he'd been complicit. He'd helped maintain the lie for 29 years. Did his wife know? I asked without turning around. Catherine, did she know about me? Silence. Then, yes, I closed my eyes. His sons? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. So everyone knew except me. I turned to face her. The woman at the funeral who looked at you like you were dirt. She knew her husband had been helping raise his friend's illegitimate black daughter. His sons knew. David's family probably knew. Half of Atlanta probably knew. And I was just walking around, living my life, completely oblivious. I'm so sorry, baby. Stop apologizing. My voice rose. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the 29 years I spent not knowing who I was. Sorry doesn't tell me how to feel about being the product of some white man's affair that he was so ashamed of he couldn't even look at me. Mama stood up, tears streaming down her face. You want to know the truth? The whole truth? Fine, I'll give it to you. I was young and black and poor, and David was older and white and powerful. He had all the control, Keisha, all of it. And when I got pregnant, I had two choices: destroy my life or protect my child. I chose you. I have always chosen you. By lying to me, by giving you a life. Her voice broke. By making sure you never felt less than, never felt like a mistake, never felt like you were born from something shameful. I built you a foundation, Keisha. It might be built on secrets, but it's strong. Look at you. You're brilliant. You're educated. You're going to be a lawyer. You think you could have done that if I'd raised you in the shadow of that shame? If everyone knew you were the boss's bastard child? The word hung in the air like poison. Is that what I am? I asked quietly. The boss's bastard? No. She crossed to me, grabbing my hands. You're Keisha Monroe. You're my daughter. You're the best thing I've ever done. And yes, I lied. Yes, I kept secrets. But every secret I kept was to protect you from a world that would have used your birth against you. I pulled my hands away. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I can handle. I'm your mother. Then act like it. The tears finally came, hot and fast. Stop protecting me from the truth and tell me everything. Every detail, every lie. I want to know it all. She stood there shaking, and then she nodded. Okay, baby. I'll tell you everything. And she did. For the next 3 hours, Marion Monroe dismantled every story I'd ever been told. She told me about David Mitchell, how he'd been charming and attentive until the pregnancy test came back positive. How he'd offered her money for an abortion, then more money to disappear, then finally agreed to support me financially only if his name never appeared on any documents. She told me about Robert's intervention, how he'd been horrified by David's cowardice, and had stepped in to make sure we were taken care of. She told me about the trust fund I didn't know existed, money set aside in my name, accessible when I turned 30. 30? I interrupted. I turned 30 in 8 months, she nodded. Robert was going to tell you then. We'd agreed. On your 30th birthday, he was going to sit you down and explain everything. But he'd died, and the truth had come out messy and painful instead of planned and gentle. She told me about Robert Langford's rage when she'd found out about the arrangement, about the threats she'd made, the lawyers she'd hired, the way Robert had stood firm and refused to abandon us. She told me about David's funeral 3 years ago, how she'd stood in the back of the church, watching strangers mourn a man who'd never had the courage to meet his own daughter. By the time she finished, I felt hollowed out, empty. There's one more thing, Mama said quietly. Robert left you something. In his will, his lawyer called me yesterday. He wants to meet with you. I looked at her, exhausted. What did he leave me? I don't know. But apparently it's significant enough that Catherine is furious. She reached for my hand again, and this time I let her take it. Whatever happens next, Keisha, I need you to know I love you. I have always loved you. And every choice I made, right or wrong, was because I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. I squeezed her hand, because despite everything, she was still my mama, but I couldn't say I forgave her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time, I told her. She nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. After she left, I sat in my apartment as the sun set, painting my walls in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in this city, there was a lawyer with information about Robert's will. Somewhere in this city, Robert Langford was probably plotting to make sure I never saw a dime of whatever Robert had left me. And somewhere deep inside me, Beneath the anger and hurt and confusion, something else was stirring. A need to know everything. To claim what was mine. Not just money, though God knows that would help with my law school debt, but recognition. Acknowledgement. Proof that I'd existed to someone beyond my mother's lies. Picked up my phone and called the number Mama had left on my counter, Whitfield. "An associates," a receptive voice answered. "Yes, hi. My name is Keisha Monroe. I believe Mr. Whitfield is expecting my call." It was time to find out what Robert Langford had left for the daughter he'd loved but never claimed. The law offices of Whitfield and Associates occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in downtown Atlanta, the kind of building where everyone wore $1,000 suits and spoke in hushed, important tones. I felt out of place the moment I stepped off the elevator in my H&M blazer and Target heels. "Ms. Monroe?" A young white woman with a sleek ponytail approached me. "Mr. Whitfield is ready for you. Follow me, please." I followed her down a corridor lined with expensive art, my heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't told anyone I was coming here. Not Mama, not my friends, not even my coworker Lisa, who usually knew everything about my life. This felt too raw, too private. James Whitfield was a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful posture of someone who'd spent decades sitting behind desks. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for coming. Please sit." His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I could see the gold dome of the state capitol glinting in the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there was my cubicle at Henderson and Associates, where I should have been right now, pretending my life hadn't imploded. "I'll get straight to it," Whitfield said, pulling a folder from his desk. "Robert Langford came to see me 6 months before his death. He wanted to update his will, and he was very specific about certain provisions regarding you." My mouth went dry. "What kind of provisions?" "He established a trust fund in your name when you were born. Over the past 29 years, that fund has grown substantially through careful investment. As of today, it's worth approximately $1.2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself. "Additionally," Whitfield continued, consulting his notes, "he's left you a property, a house in Grant Park, 3 bedrooms recently renovated, market value around $500,000. And finally, he's designated you as the primary director of the Langford Community Foundation, which provides scholarships and resources to underprivileged youth in Atlanta. The foundation has an endowment of approximately $3 million. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "Ms. Monroe? Are you all right?" "I need a minute." I put my head between my knees, fighting waves of dizziness. Nearly $2 million. A house, a foundation. Robert hadn't just helped from the shadows. He'd built me an entire legacy. "There's more," Whitfield said gently. "He left you a letter." He slid an envelope across the desk. My name was written on it in handwriting I recognized. Robert's careful, architect-precise script. I'd seen it on birthday cards, on checks for scholarship funds, on notes of encouragement before big exams. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Keisha, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you finally know the truth. I'm sorry for that. Sorry that you had to learn this way. Sorry that I couldn't be brave enough to tell you myself while I was alive. I've watched you grow from a curious little girl into a remarkable woman. Every achievement, every challenge you've overcome, every moment of grace you've shown in a world that doesn't always show grace back. I've witnessed it all, and I've been proud. So proud. I know you have questions. Why didn't I claim you publicly? Why did I let you believe I was your father when I wasn't? The truth is complicated and cowardly in equal measure. When Marion told me she was pregnant with you, I was horrified by what David had done, how he'd treated her, how he was willing to abandon his responsibility. I stepped in not out of nobility, but out of guilt. I was his boss, his friend. I'd created a workplace culture where a young black woman could be taken advantage of by a man who should have known better. But somewhere along the way, my guilt transformed into love. Real, genuine love for you. You became the daughter I'd always wanted but never had with Catherine. My sons are good men, but they're Catherine's sons, shaped by her ambition, her values, her world. You were different. You were Marion's daughter first, and Marion is one of the finest people I've ever known. I should have been braver. I should have left Catherine, claimed you publicly, given you my name. But I was weak. I chose comfort over courage, and for that, I'm profoundly sorry. The money, the house, the foundation. These are inadequate compensation for what I failed to give you. Acknowledgement, legitimacy, a father who stood beside you in daylight instead of helping from the shadows. But they're yours. Use them however you see fit. The foundation was always meant for you. I started it years ago, funding scholarships for kids who reminded me of you, smart, determined, caught between worlds. Now it's officially yours to direct. I hope you'll continue the work. I hope you'll transform my guilt-driven charity into something authentic and powerful. You deserve everything, Keisha. Don't let anyone tell you different. With love and regret, Robert, I read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. By the 3rd reading, I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or sob or throw something. Ms. Monroe? Whitfield's voice seemed to come from very far away. I should mention, Mrs. Langford is contesting the will. She's claiming undue influence and questioning your relationship to Mr. Langford. That snapped me back. What? She's arguing that you manipulated him, that Marion manipulated him, that the provisions in your favor are excessive and inappropriate. He straightened his glasses. It's a common tactic in these situations, and frankly, it rarely succeeds. Mr. Langford was of sound mind when he made these changes. We have medical records, witnesses, everything needed to prove competency. But it will mean a legal fight, possibly a lengthy one. She wants to erase me, I said quietly. Again. I wouldn't phrase it quite that way. That's exactly what it is. I folded Robert's letter carefully and put it in my purse. She erased me for 29 years, made Robert keep me hidden, and now that he's dead and can't be embarrassed anymore, she still wants me gone. Whitfield shifted uncomfortably. For what it's worth, I've been practicing law for 35 years. I've seen a lot of contested wills. This one is airtight. Mr. Langford made absolutely certain you'd be protected. Then I guess we have a fight ahead of us. He smiled slightly. I was hoping you'd say that. Mr. Langford prepaid my retainer precisely for this contingency. He knew Catherine would contest. He wanted you to have the best representation possible. Of course he did. Even in death, Robert was trying to protect me. I left Whitfield's office in a daze. Instead of going home, I drove to Grant Park, the neighborhood Robert had left me a house in. I found the address easily. A beautiful craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch, flower boxes under the windows, and a tire swing hanging from a massive oak tree in the front yard. I sat in my car across the street, staring at it. This was mine. This house with its perfect porch and its tire swing. A house meant for a family, for children, for the life Robert must have imagined I'd have. Did he picture me here? Married, maybe? Kids running through that yard? Did he see me as the stable, legitimate version of what I actually was? A secret daughter born from shame? My phone buzzed. Mama. Again. I'd been ignoring her calls since our conversation 3 days ago, needing space to process everything. But sitting here, looking at this house, I felt something shift. I answered. Keisha, baby, thank God, are you okay? I met with Robert's lawyer today. Silence. Then, and? He left me almost $2 million, Mama. A house. A foundation. My voice cracked. He left me a whole life. I heard her breath catch. Oh, baby. But Catherine's contesting the will. She's trying to take it all away. I gripped the steering wheel. I need to know something, and I need you to be honest. The foundation, the Langford Community Foundation, did you know about it? Yes, she admitted quietly. Robert told me years ago. He wanted my input on which communities to serve, which organizations to partner with. I helped him, Keisha. We worked on it together. So you've been part of this secret legacy the whole time. I didn't see it as secret. I saw it as Robert trying to do right by you in the only way he could. I looked at the house again. There's a tire swing, Mama. In the front yard of this house he left me. Do you know how many times I begged you for a tire swing when I was little? Remember? You said our rental didn't allow it. I remember. He remembered too. He bought me a house with a tire swing. Tears streamed down my face. This man, this white man who couldn't claim me, who let me call him Daddy while maintaining the lie, somehow knew me better than I knew myself. He loved you, Mama said softly. in his own broken way. Is broken love still love? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was thick with emotion. I think love is always broken, baby. We're all just trying our best with damaged hearts and impossible situations. Robert's love was broken. My love is broken, but it's still love. I wiped my eyes. I don't know who I am anymore, Mama. Am I Keisha Monroe, your black daughter from the old Fourth Ward? Am I some white man's guilty conscience made flesh? Am I the director of a foundation built on shame? Who am I? You're whoever you decide to be, she said firmly. That's the gift of knowing the truth, even when it hurts. You get to choose now. After we hung up, I got out of my car and walked up to the house, peered through the windows at hardwood floors and crown molding, at a kitchen with modern appliances, at an empty living room waiting to be filled. This could be mine. All of it could be mine. But first I had to fight for it, had to stand up and claim what Robert wanted me to have, had to face Katherine Langford and her lawyers and her rage and say, I exist, I matter. I'm not your dirty secret anymore. I pulled out my phone and called Whitfield. Ms. Monroe, tell Katherine Langford I'm not backing down, I said. Tell her I'm coming for everything Robert left me. And tell her if she wants to fight, we'll fight. Understood, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll file our response to her contest by end of week. I hung up and stood on that porch, on my porch, and felt something I hadn't felt in days. Power. Robert had given me more than money and property. He'd given me proof that I mattered, that I'd been seen, valued, loved, even if that love had to hide in shadows. Now it was time to step into the light. The first person to call me wasn't family. It was Cheryl Washington, a woman I'd known since childhood, a pillar of our church community, and someone whose opinion carried weight in every black social circle in Atlanta. Keisha Monroe. I heard some interesting news, she said, her voice dripping with that particular tone church ladies use when they're about to deliver judgment disguised as concern. Is it true you're claiming to be Robert Langford's daughter? I was in my apartment, still processing everything from the lawyer's office, and her call caught me off guard. How did you— Baby, this is Atlanta. Word travels, especially word like this. She paused, and I could practically see her pursing her lips. Now, I've known your mama since y'all moved to the old Fourth Ward. She's a good woman. But this business with some white man's will, it doesn't look good, honey. It doesn't look good at all. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm not claiming anything. Robert Langford was a married man who kept your mama as his mistress for 30 years, she cut in. And now that he's dead, suddenly there's money involved. Keisha, baby, I'm trying to help you. People are talking. They're saying your mama was well, I won't repeat it. But they're questioning everything. Your character. Her character. Whether you even deserve— I hung up. My hands were shaking. I'd known the truth would spread. Atlanta's black community was tight-knit, and gossip moved faster than MARTA trains. But I hadn't expected it to hurt this much. These were my people. My community. The folks who'd watched me grow up. Who'd celebrated my college acceptance. Who'd prayed over me at church. Now they were questioning whether I was legitimate enough to claim my own inheritance. The calls kept coming. Auntie Joyce from the neighborhood association, Brother Davis from church, even my hairdresser, Tanisha, who texted, "Girl, what's this I'm hearing about you and some white man's money? Call me." I turned off my phone, but I couldn't turn off the world. 2 days later, I went to get groceries at the Publix near Mama's house, the one I'd been shopping at since I was old enough to push a cart. I ran into Mrs. Patterson, the woman who'd taught my Sunday school class for 10 years. Keisha. She said my name like it tasted bad. I heard about your situation. I stood there in the produce section, holding a bag of apples, suddenly feeling like I was 12 years old again and had disappointed her somehow. It's complicated. Mrs. Patterson. I'm sure it is. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder. But let me tell you something, child. Your mama worked hard to give you a good reputation in this community, a respectable reputation. And now this, chasing after some white man's money? It looks like everything we thought about Marion Monroe was a lie. Your mother slept with her married boss and got pregnant, she said, her voice low but cutting. And then she let everyone believe you were Robert Langford's legitimate child. Do you know how many people she lied to? How many of us believed she was different? She was trying to protect me. She was trying to protect herself. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. And now you're doing the same thing. Taking money you probably don't deserve from a family that doesn't owe you anything. That man helped you out of guilt, Keisha, not love. And you claiming his inheritance? It's shameful. Your grandmother would be ashamed. She walked away, leaving me standing there with my apples, tears burning my eyes. That night, I finally went to Mama's house. I found her in the kitchen, where else? But she wasn't cooking. She was just sitting at the table, staring at nothing, a cold cup of coffee in front of her. They got to you too, I said, dropping into the chair across from her. She looked up, and I saw it, the weight of community judgment pressing down on her shoulders. Mrs. Patterson came by earlier, told me I needed to talk some sense into you, said you were embarrassing the family, embarrassing the community. What did you say? I told her to get off my porch before I called the police. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. She clutched her pearls and left in a huff. Despite everything, I laughed. Mama. I'm tired of their judgment, Keisha. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup like it might warm something inside her. I've spent 30 years caring what these people think. 30 years making myself small and acceptable. 30 years protecting reputations, Robert's, mine, yours. And for what? So they could turn on us the second the truth came out? They're scared, I said quietly. We challenge something they believe about themselves, about what it means to be respectable Black folks in Atlanta. Maybe respectable is overrated. I reached across the table and took her hand. I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. The foundation, the Langford Community Foundation. How involved were you? She sighed. Very. Robert came to me about 8 years ago, said he wanted to do something meaningful. Something that actually helped people instead of just writing checks to feel good. We designed it together, Keisha. The scholarship criteria, the mentorship programs, the partnerships with HBCUs. That was my work as much as his. So you built something real. We built something real, she corrected. Robert had the money and connections. I had the knowledge and understanding of what our communities actually needed. Together, we made something that's genuinely helped hundreds of kids. I thought about that. About my mother, this brilliant Black woman, working behind the scenes while Robert got all the credit. About how that dynamic mirrored their entire relationship. Her doing the real work while he provided cover. The community doesn't know that part, I said. They just see a Black woman who slept with her white boss. That's all they want to see. Her voice hardened. Because if they saw the whole truth, that I built something powerful, that I leveraged an impossible situation into resources for our people, they'd have to admit I was smarter than they gave me credit for. And that scares them more than the scandal. A knock on the door interrupted us. Mama frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. I went to answer it and found myself face to face with Reverend Clayton, our pastor for the past 15 years. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, and right now those eyes looked troubled. Keisha. Marion. May I come in? We sat in the living room, the three of us, with the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy. Reverend Clayton folded his hands, choosing his words carefully. I've been getting calls, he said finally, from concerned members of the congregation, about your family's situation. Let me guess, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. They want you to talk some sense into us. They want me to protect the church's reputation. He looked at Mama. Marion, you've been a faithful member for 25 years. You've served on committees, organized fundraisers, taught Sunday school. But some folks are saying your presence might be divisive right now. Mama's face went very still. Are you asking me to leave my church, Reverend? I'm asking you to consider taking some time away. Let things settle down. Let people process, let people judge, I interrupted. That's what you mean. Let them whisper and gossip and decide whether we're respectable enough to worship beside them. Keisha, you have to understand. No, you have to understand. I stood up, my voice shaking. My mother did what she had to do to survive in a world that gave her impossible choices. She fell in love with the wrong man, or maybe the right man at the wrong time, and she got pregnant. And instead of aborting me like my biological father wanted, instead of giving me up, instead of taking the easy way out. She kept me. She raised me. She built a life for us. And yes, Robert Langford helped. Yes, the situation was messy and complicated, but she turned that mess into something good. Reverend Clayton opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. You know what Robert left me? A foundation that's given scholarships to over 300 kids. 300 black kids from neighborhoods like this one, who got to go to college because my mother and Robert worked together to make it happen. That's her legacy, Reverend. Not the scandal. Not the affair. The actual work she did. I understand that, do you? Mama stood now too, her voice quiet but powerful. Because it sounds like you're more concerned with appearances than with justice. More worried about what the comfortable members think than what's actually right. Marion, I'm trying to help. Then help by telling your congregation the truth. She walked to the door and opened it. Tell them Marion Monroe isn't going anywhere. Tell them she's tired of being ashamed. And tell them if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with God. Because I'm done answering to them. Reverend Clayton left, looking shaken. After he was gone, Mama and I stood in her living room, both of us trembling with adrenaline and anger and something else. Something that felt almost like freedom. That felt good, she admitted. That felt terrifying, I countered. That too. My phone buzzed. I'd turned it back on. A text from Lisa, my coworker. Girl, did you really inherit millions from some white dude? Everyone at the office is talking. So it had reached my workplace too. Great. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Mama said, reading my expression. Catherine's lawyers are probably feeding stories to the press. Making you look like a gold digger. Making me look like a... Don't, I cut her off. Don't give them that power, she smiled sadly. You're stronger than I was at your age. I learned from you. I pulled her into a hug. We're going to get through this, together, and everyone who wants to judge us, they can watch us win. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of what we were up against. It wasn't just Catherine Langford and her lawyers. It wasn't just the legal battle over Robert's will. It was our entire community, questioning our worth, our respectability, our right to exist as complicated, flawed, human beings who'd done the best we could with impossible circumstances. The fight wasn't just for money or property anymore. It was for the right to be seen as whole. Bloco 6, Declaração de Guerra, Herança. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Whitfield and Associates, and I dressed for battle. Navy suit from Banana Republic, the best I owned. Hair freshly pressed and pulled back in a sleek bun. Minimal jewelry. I wanted to look professional, composed, unthreatened. Even though inside I was screaming, Catherine Langford would be there. Her lawyers would be there. And I would have to sit across a conference table from the woman who'd looked at me with pure hatred at Robert's funeral and prove I deserved what her husband had left me. Mama wanted to come, but I'd said no. This was something I needed to do alone. Whitfield met me in the lobby. Ready? No, but let's do it anyway. The conference room was all glass and steel with a view of downtown Atlanta that probably cost more per square foot than my entire apartment. Catherine was already seated, flanked by 2 lawyers in matching gray suits. She looked exactly like she had at the funeral. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, expensive clothes, the kind of composure that comes from generations of wealth and certainty. Her eyes landed on me, and I watched her expression harden. Mrs. Langford, Whitfield said smoothly, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I believe you know Ms. Monroe. I know who she is. Catherine's voice was ice. The question is whether she knows who she is. I sat down across from her, meeting her gaze directly. I know exactly who I am. Do you? She leaned forward. You're the daughter of my husband's employee, a woman who had an affair with a married man and got pregnant. And now you're claiming you deserve a portion of my husband's estate based on what? His guilt? His charity? Based on the fact that he was my father, I said quietly. He was not your father. She spat the words. David Mitchell was your father. Robert was just a man too soft-hearted for his own good, too willing to clean up other people's mistakes. One of her lawyers, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. Mrs. Langford, perhaps we should... No. She silenced him with a look. I want her to understand something. My husband spent 30 years helping you and your mother because he felt responsible for David's behavior. He paid for your education, set up trusts, bought you property, all because he couldn't stand the thought of an innocent child suffering for adult mistakes. That was Robert, always trying to save everyone. He did more than help, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He loved me. Love? Catherine laughed, bitter and sharp. You think what he felt was love? It was obligation, Ms. Monroe. Guilt dressed up as affection. And now that he's gone, you want to cash in on it. I want what he chose to give me, I corrected. Robert made these decisions of sound mind. He wrote me a letter explaining his choices. He wanted me to have these things. He wanted to assuage his conscience. She pulled out a folder and slid papers across the table. Do you know how much money my husband gave your mother over the years? Through anonymous channels? Through that foundation you're now claiming to direct? Over $5 million, Ms. Monroe. $5 million that should have gone to his legitimate children, to his actual family. I looked at the papers. Spreadsheets detailing payments, transfers, donations. The proof of Robert's support, laid out in cold numbers. Your sons inherited the company, I said. The house in Buckhead, the vacation properties, the investment portfolios. They got millions, Mrs. Langford. What Robert left me doesn't even come close to what they received. They're his sons. Her composure cracked. His real children, not the product of some sordid affair he felt obligated to support. Whitfield intervened. Mrs. Langford, this language is inappropriate and frankly grounds for what? Telling the truth? She turned her fury on him. My husband made these provisions under duress. He was manipulated by Marion Monroe for 3 decades. She used that girl as leverage, as a constant reminder of David Mitchell's indiscretion, and Robert, generous, guilty Robert, couldn't say no. That's not true, I said, my voice rising despite myself. My mother never manipulated anyone. She was a 20-year-old woman who got pregnant by her boss, a man who tried to make her abort me. Robert stepped in because it was the right thing to do. The right thing? Catherine stood abruptly. The right thing would have been staying out of it, letting David face the consequences of his actions. Instead, Robert enabled him, protected him, and in the process, tied our family to your mother's mistakes for 30 years. I stood too, done with being civil. My existence isn't a mistake. Your existence is the result of a mistake, she shot back. And I'll be damned if I let you profit from it. Mrs. Langford, her lawyer said urgently, we should discuss settlement options. There is no settlement. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. I will fight this with everything I have. I will drag your name through every court in Georgia. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you and your mother are, opportunists who latched onto my husband's guilt and won't let go even in death. She stormed out, her lawyers scrambling after her. The conference room fell silent. I sank back into my chair, my legs suddenly weak. Whitfield sat down beside me. Well, he said dryly, that went about as expected. She really hates me. She hates what you represent. The evidence that her marriage wasn't perfect, that her husband had loyalties outside their family, that she didn't have complete control. He poured me a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. But Ms. Monroe, her hatred doesn't change the law. Robert's will is valid. Her contest is weak. We will win this. At what cost? I took the water but didn't drink it. She's going to destroy my reputation. My mother's reputation. She's going to make us look like con artists. Then we make her look like what she is. A bitter woman trying to deny her husband's final wishes. He pulled out his own folder, thicker than Catherine's. Robert anticipated this. He documented everything. His reasons for setting up the trust. His relationship with you. Letters he wrote but never sent, detailing his feelings about being unable to claim you publicly. We have ammunition, Ms. Monroe. The question is whether you're willing to use it. I thought about Robert's letter, about his admission of cowardice and regret, about how much it would hurt Catherine to have her husband's emotional infidelity laid bare in court documents for everyone to see. But I also thought about Mama, about 30 years of being treated as less than, about growing up not knowing who I was, about the tire swing on the porch of a house Robert bought because he remembered a little girl's wish. Use everything, I said. I'm done protecting people who never protected me. 2 days later, I went to the Langford Community Foundation offices for the first time. It was housed in a modest building in the West End, surrounded by the communities it served. Inside, the walls were covered with photos of scholarship recipients, hundreds of young black faces, graduation caps, acceptance letters to colleges. The staff was small, 3 full-time employees and a handful of volunteers. They gathered in the small conference room, looking at me with curiosity and uncertainty. "I'm Keisha Monroe," I said, standing at the head of the table, "and as of Robert Langford's death, I'm the new director of this foundation." Silence. Then a middle-aged black woman named Diane, the program coordinator, spoke up. "We heard about the will, about the contest. Should we be worried about funding?" "No," I said firmly. "The foundation's endowment is protected regardless of the personal inheritance dispute." Robert made sure of that. I looked around at their faces. "But I want you to know, I'm not just a name on paper. I'm going to be active, involved. I want to understand every program, every scholarship, every dollar we spend." "Why?" asked Marcus, a young man who managed the mentorship program. "No offense, but most board directors just show up for the annual gala and sign checks." "Because this foundation is more than Robert's guilt project," I said. "It's more than charity. It's my mother's work. She helped design these programs, and now it's my legacy too. I want to transform it into something even more powerful." I pulled up a presentation on the small screen. I'd spent the last 2 days preparing this. Right now, we give out 50 scholarships a year. I want to double that. I want to expand our mentorship program to include career placement. I want to partner with local businesses to create internship pipelines. I want this foundation to do more than send kids to college. I want it to build pathways to power. Diane leaned forward, interested now. "That's ambitious. And expensive. Robert left me property and assets. I'm liquidating some of it and reinvesting it here. Into this work." I looked at each of them. "Mrs. Langford wants to paint me as someone chasing money. Fine. Let her watch me give it away to the communities Robert claimed to care about. Let her watch me do what he should have done openly instead of hiding behind anonymous donations." "You're going public with your connection to Robert?" Marcus asked, surprised. "I'm going public with everything," I said. "My mother and I are done hiding. Done being ashamed. The foundation is going to put my name front and center, Keisha Monroe, daughter of Marion Monroe, and biological daughter of David Mitchell, adopted legacy of Robert Langford. Let people know exactly who I am and where I came from, and then let them watch me build something that actually matters." The staff exchanged glances. Then Diane smiled. "Well, all right then. When do we start?" "Now." Over the next week, I threw myself into the foundation's work. I met with scholarship recipients, visited partner organizations, reviewed budgets and program outcomes. I discovered that Robert had been generous but passive. He'd funded programs without really understanding them, trusted his staff without engaging deeply. But Mama had been different. In the files, I found her notes, her suggestions, her carefully thought-out improvements to program design. She'd been the real architect of everything good the foundation had done. I called her one evening from the foundation office, surrounded by stacks of files. "Mama, did you know the scholarship program's retention rate is 87%? That's 20 points higher than the national average for first-generation college students." "I know, baby. We worked hard on the support structure. It's not enough to just pay tuition. Students need mentorship, need community, need people who understand the challenges they're facing. You built that." "Robert and I built that," she corrected gently. "No, Mama. I've read all the files. I've seen all your notes, your proposals, your follow-ups with students. Robert wrote the checks, but you did the work." "You always did the work." She was quiet for a moment. "Someone had to." "Well, now someone's going to give you credit for it." I pulled up the document I'd been working on. "I'm redesigning the foundation's website. There's going to be a whole page about the founders, and it's going to name you, Mama, Marion Monroe, co-founder and lead program architect. With your photo and your story. Keisha, no more hiding," I said firmly. "No more letting other people get credit for your brilliance. The world's going to know what you built. And if they don't like it, if they judge you, If they whisper and gossip, let them. You know what you did. I know what you did. And the 300 kids who went to college because of you know what you did. That's what matters. When I hung up, I sat in Robert's old office, my office now, and looked at the photos on the wall. All those young faces, all those possibilities. Catherine Langford thought she was fighting over money, but this was never about money. It was about visibility, recognition, the right to exist loudly instead of quietly, the right to claim my place in a legacy I'd helped build whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. Robert had loved me in secret. Now I was going to honor him in public. And nothing, not Catherine's lawyers, not community judgment, not my own doubts, was going to stop me. The annual Langford Community Foundation Gala was scheduled for 6 weeks after Robert's death. The planning committee wanted to cancel it. Too soon, too inappropriate given the circumstances. But I refused. We're moving forward, I told Diane and the staff. Robert would have wanted the work to continue. And frankly, I want Catherine Langford and everyone else to see that this foundation isn't going anywhere. What I didn't tell them was that I had other plans for the evening. Plans that would either liberate me or destroy me completely. The gala was held at the Georgia Aquarium, Robert's favorite venue, appropriately enough. He'd always loved the symbolism of it, he'd told Mama once. All these different species coexisting in the same water, creating something beautiful together. I arrived early in a dress I couldn't afford. Deep emerald green, form-fitting, elegant. I wanted to look like I belonged, like I wasn't the secret anymore, but the legacy. Mama arrived shortly after, stunning in royal blue, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo. She grabbed my hand when she saw me. "You look like a queen," she whispered. "I learned from one," I whispered back. The venue filled quickly. Atlanta's elite, black and white, came out for the Langford Foundation Gala. It was the social event of the season, even more so now because of the scandal. Everyone wanted to see the illegitimate daughter who was claiming Robert Langford's legacy. Everyone wanted to witness the spectacle. I saw Catherine arrive with her sons, all 3 of them in black, like they were attending another funeral. She saw me across the room and her face hardened, but she didn't leave. She wouldn't give me that satisfaction. I saw Mrs. Patterson from church, Reverend Clayton, Cheryl Washington, and dozens of other people from my community. Some looked supportive. Most looked curious. All of them were judging. The evening progressed with dinner, speeches from board members, a video showcasing the foundation's work. I sat at the head table, visible to everyone, refusing to hide. Then it was time for my speech. I'd rewritten it 17 times. The first version had been angry, a manifesto about secrets and shame and the courage it takes to exist as your full self. The last version had been safe, generic platitudes about Robert's legacy and the importance of education. But standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, black and white, rich and poor, supporters and critics, I realized I didn't want to give either of those speeches. I wanted to tell the truth. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "For those who don't know me, my name is Keisha Monroe. I'm the new executive director of the Langford Community Foundation, and I'm Robert Langford's daughter." The room went completely silent. "Not his biological daughter," I continued. "That distinction belongs to a man named David Mitchell, who died 3 years ago without ever meeting me, without ever wanting to meet me. Because I was his mistake, the product of an affair with his young black receptionist, a problem he wanted erased before I was even born." I heard gasps, whispers, saw Catherine grip her champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Robert Langford stepped in when David Mitchell stepped back. He provided for me financially. He showed up for birthdays and graduations. He paid for my education through anonymous scholarships. And when he died, he left me a portion of his estate, including control of this foundation. Not because I manipulated him. Not because my mother seduced him or leveraged me for financial gain, but because he loved me. In his imperfect, complicated, cowardly way. He loved me. Mama was crying. I could see her from the podium, tears streaming down her face. I say cowardly because Robert could have claimed me publicly. He could have divorced his wife, legitimized me, given me his name. But he didn't. He kept me secret, kept my mother secret, helped us from the shadows while maintaining his perfect life in the light. And for 30 years, we accepted that arrangement because we thought we had no choice. I looked directly at Catherine. Mrs. Langford has contested her husband's will. She's argued that I'm not entitled to his legacy, that I'm an opportunist taking advantage of a generous man's guilt. And maybe she's right about the guilt part. Maybe Robert did support me out of guilt initially. But guilt doesn't buy a house with a tire swing because you remember a little girl once wanted one. Guilt doesn't write letters you never send, expressing love you're too afraid to speak out loud. Guilt doesn't build a foundation designed specifically to help kids who remind you of the daughter you couldn't claim. My voice broke slightly. I paused, took a breath, steadied myself. Robert Langford was a complicated man who made complicated choices. He hurt people, his wife, his sons, my mother, and me, by trying to manage an impossible situation instead of being brave enough to face it head-on. But he also helped hundreds of young people get educations they couldn't otherwise afford. He invested in communities that other wealthy white men ignored, and he did it because of my mother. I gestured to Mama. "Marion Monroe, please stand up." She looked shocked, but she stood, trembling. "This woman," I said, my voice ringing through. "The aquarium designed every program this foundation runs. She identified the gaps in traditional scholarship models. She created the mentorship structure that gives our retention rate of 87%. She built partnerships with HBCUs and local businesses. She did the real work while Robert provided the funding and took the credit. Because that's what Black women do. We build the world and let other people put their names on it." Applause started somewhere in the back, scattered at first, then building. I saw Diane and Marcus and the rest of the foundation staff standing, clapping. I saw people from the community standing. Even some white faces in the crowd were nodding, applauding. Catherine remained seated, stone-faced. "I'm not the secret you kept anymore," I said, looking around the room. "I'm not half of anything, not half white, not half legitimate, not half worthy. I'm wholly myself. Keisha Monroe, daughter of Marion Monroe, biological daughter of David Mitchell, adopted legacy of Robert Langford. I'm all of it, the messy parts and the beautiful parts, the scandal and the scholarship, the shame and the power." I pulled out a document, the one I'd prepared with Whitfield. "Effective immediately, I'm donating half of my personal inheritance from Robert Langford back to this foundation. That's approximately $600,000 that will fund scholarships specifically for young women of color pursuing law degrees, because I'm going to finish my JD, pass the bar, and become the lawyer Robert always said I could be. And I'm going to help other young women do the same." The applause was thunderous now. The other half of my inheritance I'm keeping. Not because I'm greedy, but because I've earned it. I've earned the right to benefit from a man who loved me, even if he couldn't say it out loud. I've earned the right to sleep in a house with a tire swing. I've earned the right to exist without apologizing for the circumstances of my birth. I looked at Catherine one more time. "Mrs. Langford, if you want to continue contesting the will, that's your right. But understand, I'm not backing down. I'm not disappearing. I'm claiming every single thing your husband wanted me to have, and I'm going to use it to continue his work. Our work. The work he and my mother built together." I stepped back from the podium, my legs shaking, my heart pounding. Then something unexpected happened. Mama walked toward the stage, slowly, deliberately, with tears streaming down her face. She climbed the steps and stood beside me, taking my hand. "My name is Marion Monroe," she said into the microphone, her voice strong despite the tears. And everything my daughter just said is true. I had an affair with my married boss when I was 20 years old. I got pregnant. I kept my baby even when her father wanted me to abort her. And I spent 30 years hiding that truth because I was afraid. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of what people would think of me and my daughter. The room was absolutely silent now. Robert Langford wasn't perfect. Our arrangement wasn't perfect. But we built something good together. This foundation has changed lives. And my daughter... Her voice broke. My brilliant, beautiful, courageous daughter is going to make it even better. I'm done hiding. I'm done being ashamed. And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, there's the door. She pointed, dramatic and defiant. No one moved. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. I recognized the voice before. I saw him. Brother Malcolm from the youth program at our church. A young man who'd received one of our scholarships 5 years ago and was now getting his PhD at Morehouse. "That's right, Mrs. Monroe," he called out. "Tell your truth." Others joined in. More standing ovations. More applause. I looked out and saw a room divided. Some people clapping enthusiastically. Others sitting rigid with disapproval. Still others looking conflicted. But everyone was paying attention. Everyone was witnessing. We weren't invisible anymore. Catherine Langford stood abruptly and walked out, her sons following. Her departure caused a ripple through the crowd, but it didn't stop the applause. Later, after the formal program ended and people mingled, I was surrounded by well-wishers and critics in equal measure. Diane hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. Marcus told me I was the most badass nonprofit director in Atlanta. Several scholarship recipients came up to thank me, to tell me their stories, to say they'd been inspired. But others kept their distance. I saw Reverend Clayton speaking quietly to a group of church members, all of them glancing my way. I saw Mrs. Patterson leave early, her face pinched with disapproval. I saw white board members conferring in corners, probably deciding whether to resign. Mama and I finally escaped to the aquarium's observation tunnel, the one where you can walk underneath the tank and watch sharks and rays swimming overhead. We stood there in the blue light, exhausted and exhilarated and terrified. Did we just ruin our lives? I asked. Maybe, Mama said. Or maybe we just started living them honestly for the first time. Above us, a massive whale shark glided by, ancient and unbothered. No going back now, I said. No going back, she agreed. We stood there together, mother and daughter, watching the shark circle overhead, waiting to see what would rise from the wreckage we'd just created. 3 months after the gala, I sat in my new office at the Langford Community Foundation, reviewing scholarship applications. The house with the tire swing had become my home. The legal battle with Catherine had been settled. Whitfield was right. Her contest was weak, and eventually her lawyers convinced her to accept a compromise. She kept the Buckhead mansion and the vacation properties. I kept everything Robert had specifically designated for me. We would never be family, but we were no longer at war. The cost of that peace, though, had been steep in other ways. Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church I'd attended since childhood, had asked Mama and me to take a break from membership. Reverend Clayton had been apologetic but firm. Too many congregants were uncomfortable. The situation was divisive. Perhaps we'd be happier somewhere else. We'd left quietly, though Mama had made sure to tell him exactly what she thought of a church that preached grace, but couldn't extend it to its own members. We'd found a new church home at Vision Fellowship, a progressive congregation in East Atlanta that didn't blink at our story. Their pastor, a young black woman named Reverend Michelle Harris, had actually hugged us after service and said, "Your mess is your ministry now. Welcome home." Some friendships had survived. Lisa from work had stood by me, even when the office gossip had reached a fever pitch. Tanisha, my hairdresser, had defended me to anyone who spoke ill of us in her salon, but others had disappeared, phone calls unreturned, invitations withdrawn, decades of relationship evaporating, because the truth had been too uncomfortable. The hardest loss had been Mrs. Patterson. I'd seen her at the grocery store 2 weeks after the gala, and when our eyes met, she'd turned and walked the other way. This woman who'd taught me Bible verses and brought me soup when I was sick, who'd been like a grandmother to me, she'd chosen judgment over love. It still hurt to think about, but there had been unexpected gains too. The foundation had received a flood of donations after the gala. People inspired by our story, by Mama's courage, by the work we were doing. We doubled our scholarship fund within 2 months. National media had picked up the story. And suddenly I was being interviewed by NPR, featured in Essence magazine, invited to speak at conferences about nonprofit leadership and authentic storytelling. I'd become what I'd never wanted to be, famous for my trauma. But I was learning to use that platform for something meaningful. The most surprising gain had been Catherine's sons. 2 weeks after the settlement, the older one, Christopher, had called me. The conversation had been awkward at first, stilted with the weight of everything unsaid. But he'd told me something that changed everything. "Dad talked about you," he'd said. Not often, but when he did, his whole face would light up. He'd mentioned something smart you'd said, something you'd accomplished. Chris and we knew he had this other life, this other family. And honestly, it made us jealous as hell, because he never looked that proud when he talked about us. We'd met for coffee after that. Then again, slowly, carefully, we were building something. Not exactly siblings, but not strangers either. They'd given me stories about Robert I'd never known, and I'd given them insight into the man who'd been their father, but also so much more complicated than they'd understood. Now, sitting in my office, I heard a knock. Mama appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing me one. She'd officially joined the foundation staff 3 weeks ago as Director of Program Development, finally getting paid for work she'd been doing for free for years. Her first act had been to overhaul our mentorship program, adding a component specifically for young mothers pursuing their education. "Because somebody should have mentored me," she'd said, "when I was 20 and pregnant and terrified." "I was just reviewing the applications for the Marion Monroe scholarship," I told her, gesturing to my screen. She'd protested when I'd insisted on naming the new law school scholarship after her. "Name it after Robert," she'd said. "He provided the money." "You provided everything else," I'd countered. "And this scholarship is for women who've made complicated choices, who've had to be twice as strong to get half as far, who've built something beautiful out of impossible circumstances." "That's you, Mama. That's your story," she'd cried, then agreed. Now she sat across from me, sipping her coffee, looking more at peace than I'd ever seen her. The weight she'd carried for 30 years, the weight of secrets and shame, had been lifted. She stood taller now, smiled easier, laughed without that edge of tension I'd grown so accustomed to I'd stopped noticing it was there. "You have plans tonight?" she asked. "Study group for evidence class. Bar exams in 4 months, and I'm not taking any chances." I'd finished my last year of law school at night while running the foundation during the day. It had been brutal. 18-hour days, endless reading, panic attacks about whether I could actually do it all. But I'd done it. Graduated magna cum laude. Now I just had to pass the bar. "You're going to pass," Mama said, reading my anxiety. "You're brilliant, baby. You've always been brilliant." "I'm tired, Mama. So damn tired." "I know." She reached across the desk and took my hand. "But you're doing it. You're becoming exactly who you were meant to be." My phone buzzed. A text from Christopher. "Mom asked me to give you this. Says it's been sitting in a safety deposit box for years. Dad made her promise to give it to you if anything happened to him." An attachment loaded. A photo of a letter addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. My breath caught. "There's another letter." Mama leaned over to look. "What does it say?" I opened the image, zoomed in, and read aloud. "My dearest Keisha, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you know the truth. I hope Marion told you gently. I hope you can forgive us both for the secrets we kept. By now you've probably met with Whitfield. You know about the money, the foundation, the house, material things. Inadequate compensation for what I failed to give you. A father who stood beside you in daylight. But there's something else I want you to know. Something I could never say while I was alive. You saved me, not the other way around. When Marion told me she was pregnant, I was furious. Furious at David for his cowardice. Furious at myself for creating a culture where that kind of abuse of power could happen. I stepped in out of guilt and rage and obligation. But then you were born, and Marion brought you to my office one day. You were maybe 3 months old, wrapped in a yellow blanket, your eyes already so alert and curious. You looked at me like you could see straight through to my soul, and something in me cracked open. I'd built a life of surfaces, a marriage without intimacy, a business without meaning, a reputation without substance. I was successful and empty. But you, Keisha, you were real, raw, honest. You demanded nothing but gave me everything. Purpose, joy, a reason to be better than I was. Watching you grow was the greatest privilege of my life. Every achievement of yours felt like redemption for my failures. Every time you called me Daddy, even though I knew I didn't deserve the title, my heart broke and healed simultaneously. I hope you use what I've left you to build something extraordinary. Not for me, not to honor my memory or continue my legacy. For yourself, for the world you want to create, for the children who will come after you, who need to see someone who looks like them in positions of power. Be bold, my dear girl. Be unapologetic. Be wholly yourself. You once asked me when you were maybe 7, why you had to work twice as hard to get half as much. I gave you some platitude about the world being unfair, but here's what I should have said. You don't have to accept that equation. You can rewrite it. You have the intelligence, the courage, the resilience to demand the world treat you as whole, not as half. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver. I'm sorry I couldn't claim you publicly. I'm sorry I left you to fight battles I should have fought for you. But I'm not sorry you exist. You are the best thing I've ever been a part of creating, even from a distance, even imperfectly, even in secret. I love you. I have always loved you. And I am so proud of who you've become. Dad. By the time I finished reading, I was sobbing. Mama was crying too, reaching across the desk to hold me. He called himself Dad, I choked out. At the end, he finally called himself Dad. Because that's what he was, Mama whispered, in the ways that mattered. We sat there together, crying and healing, until my phone buzzed again. A reminder, study group in 30 minutes. I wiped my eyes, pulled myself together. There was work to do, always more work. The bar exam to pass, the foundation to grow. A life to build that honored all the complicated, painful, beautiful pieces of my story. I stood up, grabbed my bag, then paused at the door to look back at Mama. Are we okay? I asked. Really okay? She smiled. That beautiful, fierce smile that had been my North Star my entire life. We're better than okay, baby. We're free. 6 months later, I got the letter. Congratulations. You have passed the Georgia bar examination. I called Mama first, then Christopher, then Diane and Marcus and everyone who'd supported me through the impossible year of law school and foundation work and legal battles and personal reckonings. That night, we gathered at the house with the tire swing, my house now, truly mine, for a celebration. The yard was filled with people. My new church family from Vision Fellowship, foundation staff and scholarship recipients, Lisa from work, Tanisha and half her salon, Christopher and his brother, and dozens of others who'd become my chosen family when my inherited family had fallen apart. Mama stood on the porch and raised her glass. To Keisha Monroe, she announced. Attorney at law, executive director, my daughter, the bravest person I know. Everyone cheered. I looked around at these faces, black and white, rich and poor, blood family and chosen family, and felt something I'd been chasing my entire life without knowing it. Wholeness. I wasn't half of anything anymore. Not half black, not half legitimate, not half loved. I was wholly myself, complicated, flawed, powerful, real. I'd been born from a secret, raised in shadows, taught to make myself small and acceptable. But I'd claimed my space in the light. I'd fought for my right to exist loudly, messily, authentically. And I'd won. Not because the legal battle was over, though it was. Not because I'd passed the bar, though I had, but because I'd stopped apologizing for existing. I'd stopped trying to earn worthiness. I'd accepted that I deserved everything. Love, recognition, inheritance, power, simply because I was here. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Mama had hugged me goodnight, I sat on the porch swing, the tire swing hung nearby from the oak tree, and looked up at the Atlanta sky. "Thank you," I whispered to Robert, wherever he was, "for loving me even when you couldn't say it. For building me a foundation even when you couldn't give me your name. For believing I was whole, even when I didn't know I was broken." The swing creaked gently in the evening breeze. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank document. The Essence editor who'd interviewed me had asked if I'd be interested in writing a longer piece, maybe even a book, about my journey. I'd said I'd think about it. Now, I started typing, "My name is Keisha Monroe. I'm 29 years old. I'm Black. I'm a lawyer. I'm an executive director of a foundation that's changing lives. And I'm the daughter of a 20-year-old woman who chose courage when the world told her to choose shame." This is my story. Not half of it. Not the sanitized version. All of it. The messy, painful, beautiful truth of what it means to claim yourself when the world wants you erased. This is the story of how I became whole. I smiled, kept typing, and somewhere above me, the stars witnessed.